Okay, you are listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. On the program tonight, we'll be joined by Councilmember Mike Driscoll, School Board President Reginald Streeter, and our own Lance Haver will report on PGW billing, and Denise Clay Murray will preview her Friday column. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And Lance, how are you doing?
I'm waiting for winter.
Yeah, well, we're going to keep waiting. I don't think we see any sign of that.
I haven't gotten my boots out yet.
Yeah, winter doesn't seem to be interested in paying us a visit.
No, and that's a big concern for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons is what you're going to tell us about right now, Lance.
Right. So I wanted to start with doing a couple quick updates. First, on unemployment compensation. I think everyone knows we have a new governor. He just took office. And the question becomes, what is he going to do about the unemployment offices? And if we could call up the slideshow for me. So the problem, what we're now being told, is the software company that the former administration hired has a problem fixing the problems. And we're waiting to hear what the new governor is going to do. Will he restaff the offices? Will he have people answer the phones? Will he force the company that we're all paying with our tax dollars to do a good job? But to put it in perspective, we asked for someone to do us a video about what it's like to actually apply for unemployment compensation, someone who has the skill set to fill out all the forms, and see whether that's really the problem. The problem is the users, or the problem is the system. So if we could please play that video.
Hi, my name's Alexander. I'm 25 years old. I'm from Westchester, Pennsylvania, and I've been unemployed for the past 3.5 months now. So in 2020, I graduated college and I started working at a chemistry lab as a lab chemist. And this past October, the lab ran out of funding and I found myself without a job. The day after that, I started applying for jobs and I've had some interviews since then, but no luck at finding work. And about a month ago, I realized I was eligible for the Pennsylvania unemployment program. So I applied, said I would be receiving about half of what I was making in the chemistry lab. I mean, this program really could save me and help sustain me as I look for work. While that was all great and good, I still have not received any money from the Pennsylvania unemployment program, and it's been a month. So I called them twice, I haven't heard anything back from them, and I don't know how to get in contact with anyone. So I haven't been paid, and honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do if I don't get paid. Okay, so we're going to call the number. Let me look this number up real quick. PA Unemployment Office. Online with 267 reviews. It looks like they have 1.2 stars. Okay, let's see if we can call them. Okay, so we're in the busy line. I am just going to keep redialing that until we don't get the busy line. Oh. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Literally, I'm calling them and it's literally just going right to the busy tone. It's like you're calling like sweepstakes. It's like ridiculous. They should be there to help you. I'm going to try this 50 times and see if I can get through. We just need more people at the office who are willing to work with us and just make sure people like me who paid their Social Security, who paid the unemployment while they were working, help sustain us as we're looking for new work, because it's honestly just so disheartening that we trusted the system and we put our money into it and we're not getting back out of it what we deserve.
I want to thank Alexander for sharing his story with us. It's not a great story, but unfortunately it's true for so many different people. And as the new governor takes office and we don't really know who he was relying upon for advice. I think many people know that he kept a lot secret. We don't know who paid for his parties. We don't know who paid for his balls. And we don't know who paid and brought in all the people giving him advice for what he's going to do going forward. But we will know soon what he's going to do with the unemployment program. And hopefully he's going to get people to answer the phone so people like Alex aren't going to be facing that. Second update I wanted to give was about SEPTA. We've talked about SEPTA before. If we call up the slideshow again, thank you. So there are two events about SEPTA, both this coming Monday, that I just wanted to let our listeners know about. The first is City Council is going to be holding virtual hearings on the quote unquote bus revolution. And that's where they're going to be eliminating some bus lines, changing others, and adding some bus lines on what they call on-demand bus lines in the suburbs. So anybody who is interested in testifying and talking about what it would mean for them to have their bus eliminated or to have their wait times doubled, you can go to City Council's webpage, and perhaps we could actually be kind enough to call up the email address, if we can do that, and put it up, and people can email City Council clerks and get on the agenda to speak. I've asked to speak. I have not heard back yet, but I'm confident that I'll be allowed to speak. And I just want to remind the council people that the consultants that SEPTA hired are trying to redesign the system so that it serves the purposes during COVID, which hopefully we'll never have again, and doesn't serve the purposes for a growing number of people using SEPTA. The next thing is SEPTA itself is having a meeting for what they call the bus revolution. Now, they're saying that over the last few months, they've been collecting all this data, and they're now going to share with us. Those of you who watched the interview we did with SEPTA's project manager know they told us they were going to have this to us months before. But apparently they decided to hold on to all of this until this Monday night at 6:30. And they're going to be going forward and telling us what people's response is. Now, I don't think we really have to wait until we know what the response is, because that was clear from the article in the Philadelphia Inquirer about the riders in Roxborough and Mattiong. It's been clear that State Senator Saval has written a letter to them saying they can't make cuts to the 45. State Representative Waxman is going to be on the call. I think it's very clear to them, with City Council holding hearings, with people showing up and so many people saying you have to start over, that these changes may be changes that experts like, but they're not changes that riders want. So I think what we're going to be finding out is, who is SEPTA going to be serving when they have changed the routes? Will they be serving their technical experts? Will the system be better for people who don't live here, who study public transit? Or will it be better for the people who live here, who ride public transit? And hopefully we'll get a sense of that Monday at 6:30. And anyone who's interested and wants to hear, we've put right up on the screen. You go to the SEPTABusRevolution.com. You can sign up to be as part of the virtual meeting. Now, you probably will not be allowed to speak. It's not like City Council. They're not going to make any they're not going to create opportunities for people to speak or testify, but they will create possibilities for people to hear what's going on. The last thing I wanted to talk about this evening was PGW bills. Now, I know a lot of people are getting bills, and they may be somewhat concerned about how high the bills are. And it's very difficult to understand what's going on, because we have one of the warmest Januaries on record. As we talked about earlier, there hasn't been any snow. We did have that one cold week. And there is a tendency for bills to go up during the holiday season, especially the more children you have, the more the door gets opened and closed when there's no school and when there are people visiting. So bills do tend to go higher, but that really doesn't explain what's going on. So the gas bills really consist of two major parts. It's the price of getting the gas to our furnaces, so that's distributing the gas, and it's the price of gas itself. There are a few smaller things that are part of the bill, but those are the two major parts. PGW has a new CEO, and under the new CEO, there's been a couple of significant problems already, which calls into question what's actually going on. I think most people remember that there was a problem, what they called the weatherization charge, this past spring. The weatherization is another charge, is another part of the bill, which is supposed to make up for raising the bill when it's warm weather and lowering the bill when it's cold weather. But last May, the weatherization charge was so high on so many people's bills that it actually was the same as the usage. And PGW had to go before the Public Utility Commission and ask that weatherization charge to be set aside, and it was. More recently this fall, PGW had some problems trying to get people applying for the low-income plan to get their applications. For whatever reason, the address that they were using wasn't accepting the applications, and the applications were being sent back to people. And now they put on the webpage what someone should do if their application for the low-income plan was rejected and mailed back to them as undeliverable. It's kind of hard to accept that the way that they're talking to us is through a banner on their webpage. I don't know who would think to go to the webpage to find out what happened, but if you're fortunate enough to know to do that, then you know what to do. But so those are two of the problems that we've seen recently under the new management. And PGW's price of gas has to do with what gas costs when it's bought. PGW doesn't raise the rates. They don't do anything else. What we're doing, though, is reading exactly an answer that PGW sent us. PGW has a range of pricing due to PGW's gas portfolio, which is made up of long-term gas contracts, short-term gas contracts, off-site storage facilities, and on-system LNG storage facilities. The range of pricing is approximately between $3.25 and $5.40 for 1,000 cubic feet of the gas, which is the price of the cost of the commodity only. So this price is set every quarter. And every quarter, depending upon what the price of natural gas is, this amount goes up or goes down. And what PGW is telling us is that they don't buy gas on the spot market. They buy longer term contracts, and they buy some gas during the summer months when it's inexpensive, and they store it and use it then. But as we see, the price of natural gas has been incredibly volatile this year. You can see that when PGW set their prices for the gas cost recovery, the price of gas was really around $9 per 1,000 cubic foot. Now, today, as we're talking, it's below $4. So if you set the price of the gas in September, you are going to be overestimating what it was going to be costing in January. Part of that had to do with the war in Ukraine. Part of that had to do with the natural gas companies taking advantage of that and simply not pumping as much gas out as what they thought people would need so they could force the price up. And part of that was nobody knows how cold the winter is going to be until the winter starts. So the price for speculators shoots way up. People who have to buy the gas have to buy it in what's called the spot market. And then if it gets colder, they made a good deal. If it got warmer, they paid twice as much. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at when the price of gas was set, the price of natural gas was twice what it is now. PGW, because they can store gas and because they have so many different ways of buying it, didn't buy any gas on the spot market. They buy 30% of the gas they use in a long-term contract. And everything else they buy in different types of contracts. But the price remains constant. The price at the spot market indicates how much you would have to pay for it today. And those projections made long-term price the gas for the long-term contracts and the short-term contracts. So these are all PGW's answers. When they priced the gas cost recovery on December 1st, the price of gas was $6.80. It's now $3.45. So you can see the price that they were using was significantly higher than what the price is now. We don't know what happened in the last gas filing because PGW on its webpage doesn't use that filing. They don't use the December filing. They only use the March filing. And in March, they did lower the cost. They lowered the price of natural gas by a relatively modest amount. The thing is, we don't know what's going on now, and we don't know whether they're doing a good job or not. We won't find out until the next time the gas costs are set, and that's going to be in March. So it would be possible, if PGW wanted to try and help people, for them to file for immediate relief and lower the rates by a small margin or a relatively large margin. 60% of our bills are the cost of natural gas. So it is possible that they could do that. I don't think they're going to. They didn't indicate that they will. And that raises the question for the mayoral candidates. And that's what we will do in the next 2 weeks. We'll try and get the mayoral candidates to answer a very simple question. What would they do to keep gas bills affordable? At a time when natural gas prices spike and fall, when PGW's had some mishaps in its billing and some mishaps in its low-income program, what will the new mayor do to make sure that PGW serves us? And hopefully we'll get those responses and we'll share them with our viewers.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you very much. And we're going to be keeping an eye on that. We'll be speaking to the candidates about this and other issues as we move through the spring. The primaries in May, and it's a long time off, but it's not. So we're gonna see how that goes. So Lance, thank you so much. What we'd like to do for you now is play our interview with School Board President Reginald Streeter. Right, President Reginald Streeter, thank you so much for being with us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and all your listeners.
So last month, you were elected the new president of the school board. Before we get into things you're thinking about doing, policy, that kind of stuff, can you tell us what the school board is and what the president does?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, and I'm happy to answer that question. So the school board is a 9-member board that sets the policies, the policies. We dictate how the budget is divvied up, or we approve the budget. But on top of that, we also advocate, for things such as more funding and things of that nature. Even the mayor appoints us and city council confirms us, which means that's the democratic nexus point of having the appointed board. But with that being said, I would say I think that's the end of what we do. So for the most part, we also have monthly action meetings as well, where we discuss issues and do the work of the board. Sometimes we may have, community engagement by way of having special meetings per year just for the purpose of hearing from the public as well. And we try to partner as much as we can with the school district to do the work for the students.
Okay, so you were a student of the school district of Philadelphia. In the time since you were a student till now, what has changed? What are some of the major differences?
Wow. So I went to Germantown High School, which is sad to say it no longer exists. Went to Leeds Middle School. So I think that's one of the biggest differences, I think. But at that time, when I graduated, I actually looked at my high school diploma, and I noticed that we didn't have a superintendent. And the district, I think, was in the type of trauma and crisis that I would argue doesn't exist right now. Even though there are some issues that we're dealing with right now, I think the district is in a better, well-positioned place to do what we need to do for children as well. And I think where we're different right now is that we have to make decisions, but I think that we're better funded than we were back then. But I still will say that we're still poorly underfunded for what the children deserve in Philadelphia.
So as school board president, who do you answer to? Who are your constituents?
Our constituents are every stakeholder in Philadelphia who has an interest, whether it's business community. I'm not saying them first as if they're the most important, but children first, I would say. We are student-centered. We make our decisions from a student-centered perspective, but also the teachers, all of the staff that work in the school district, parents, other organizations or institutions within Philadelphia that has to coordinate with the district, or they would like to coordinate with as well, to give our children the educational experience that they deserve. And obviously, there's also working with City Council on the budget. Without City Council's support, and we're appreciative of the budgetary, the money the funds that have been that's been given to us so far. They're also, I wouldn't say they're constituents, but they're a partner. And then obviously the mayor as well, The mayor appoints us. I think he constructed his board in a way that with certain talents and skill sets, so the board as a unit is very well positioned to lead this work.
Now, you had mentioned that you went to Germantown High School, which is since closed. Would you support or vote for any more neighborhood school closings?
Well, that's a tough question. So when you think about the types of services and the types of extracurriculars and the types of tools that we would like to give all students and opportunities, we also have to think about being good stewards with public dollars. And the last thing that we want to do is find ourselves in a position where we are on the cusp of or being taken over by the state. But even with that being said, right now we're in the beginning portion. It's not the beginning. We've started the process of what our facility planning process, where we have gotten stakeholder engagement. There may be more stakeholder engagement coming in that space to figure out what the school district should look like. And it might mean closing some schools in some places, but building brand new schools in other places. We've been building schools. We have schools like Cassidy that is being built right now. And we think that showing the public that we are building and that some of the newer schools will have the amenities and the types of things that won't break, for example, where you need change orders and things like that to fix. Maybe people will be more open-minded to, hey, well, maybe I'm attached to this building because of what it means to me, but maybe it's time to rebuild the school district in a way. And I think what we're trying to do is what Washington, D.C. did, where they took a step back maybe 15 or 20 years ago and looked at the system of school buildings that they had, some of which are old, just like our buildings are old, and thought about reimagining their district in a way and letting the infrastructure also dictate where that is. So that's where we are with that. But as far as voting to close schools, again, I think if it is made if it is hey, if you don't do this, you're risking destabilizing the system or having the ability to run the school district while also thinking about where do we build at the same time. I mean, I can't say I can, I can't say I would, but that's the answer I have for you today.
Okay. One of the things that we've heard a lot about, and this is going back a couple of years actually, we get a lot of questions about this, and we actually got a couple of questions about this when we told people you're going to be joining us. Will you as president look to change the speaker policy so that everyone can have 3 minutes and not limit the number of speakers per meeting?
Well, I mean, no, people don't like this answer, but there's currently litigation ongoing right now, so I won't go too deep into the facts, but I will try to give you something. I would just say the policy itself is not intended to limit speech. It's not intended to pick and choose who gets to speak. It's actually intended to give individuals an opportunity to speak in a way where but the business of the district can still get done. The business of the board can still get done. So as far as the time limit, right now there's litigation ongoing right now, but we're going to hold pat, I believe, until we until what the court decides. But right now, I think the trial is actually starting in a few weeks. So I mean, let's just say stay tuned.
Okay. And the last thing I'll ask you before I bring Denise in, charter schools are like a third of the school district budget. It's a lot. Would you consider having public charter hearings for renewals and for applications?
So we actually, so some of the process right now is public. So the way it works as it relates to decisions for renewals is there is a public meeting where we discuss on the record based upon evidence or data that's brought to us by the charter school office, whether we will decide to start the process of non-renewal, right? So right now there are hearings going on right now as it relates to some of the non-renewal decisions that have come up. They are publicly accessible as well. So I think that we're already doing things in a public way, but I know that others are saying, hey, there's more things that you all do that should become public. I think all of that stuff is on the table. Again, I'm committed personally, and again, I have to get 8 other board members to agree to be more communicative and being more open about the process, because I do think it's important for people to understand why we're making certain decisions, and decisions aren't just arbitrary or capricious or just doing things because we want to do them.
I'd like to bring Denise Murray here on the phone line.
Hi, President Streeter. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Now, one of the things that has come up a lot when it comes to the school district of Philadelphia is the fact that the school board is not elected, that it is appointed by the mayor, and when the district was under state control, part of it was appointed by the governor. Have you thought about the possibility of an elected school board? And if so, do you think it can work here in Philadelphia?
The board wants to stay apolitical. It's striving to stay apolitical. And I think that is one of the things that our forebearer, the SRC, was, I think, accused of constantly making political decisions behind closed doors and things of that nature. So with that kind of in the backdrop, I would say, personally, I think that right now we just got local control back. I think it is important to note that City Council confirms. So City Council has the opportunity to veto any decision that the mayor makes as it relates to who the mayor appoints. And with that being said, I think that as it relates to whether it could work, I'm not sure. I don't know. I will say this as a sitting board member. I do like the fact that I am not beholden to any special interest. No one helped get me elected. There's no one who can call me tonight and press a button and say, hey, I helped get you elected, therefore I need you to do this. I think this model, when done correctly, it gives the Board of Education the runway to have a student-centered focus. I think too often decisions are often made with the adults in mind first. I'm not talking about the parents, and we're not talking about the children first. And I think that could be borne out by some of the allegations that have come out. People saying that the board is doing this for this reason or that reason, when in fact that we feel comfortable that we're making decisions thinking about children first. And it's not just in the charter sector but also in our monthly meetings, we make a point to hold ourselves accountable, put the data up for everybody to see, and ask the district questions of what are we going to do about it as it relates to student achievement, making sure our children are feeling safe and loved in their schools. So I know it's a roundabout way to say it, but I think this model works pretty well. I think City Council is the kind of political arm that I think balances us, to remind us, as it relates to constituents and things of that nature. And we're going to do better as well to engage directly with the public. But I do like the fact that I don't have to check with a donor. I don't have to worry about running for election. All of my time is toward the children.
Okay, now speaking of charters, because I'm a freelance writer when I'm not doing this, I've written about the charter school situation, particularly when it comes to charters run by African Americans, for a few of the outlets that I work with. Because the argument that a lot of these schools are making is that you're trying to shut us down just because we're Black owned, despite the fact that when you look at some of the test scores, they're less than impressive. How do you get folks, what have you learned about this particular situation? And how do you kind of explain to people that this is not a product of racism, this is a product of numbers?
So, I'm not trying to bring my personal skill set, but I'm a discrimination attorney. I do employment discrimination work, so I understand the theories of action, whether it's disparate impact is where a policy tends to have a disparate impact on a certain group over others, or whether it's disparate treatment where there's explicit forms of discrimination at play. I don't think the explicit forms of discrimination are at play here. I would argue as Black folk that, especially as a fellow Black, as a sister, you understand that typically in America, period, systems, we may not come to the table with the requisite resources or the requisite institutional knowledge due to brain drain, things like that can actually that I would argue may create disparate outcomes for us in general, right? I think that's a different conversation than, hey, you're closing us down because you're Black. But I think the difference between this and an employment discrimination case is that if there's an issue, for example, of background checks, right? Racism or not, I don't think that a school should stay open or a school shouldn't be asked to comply with the law if indeed those things are occurring, right? So that's kind of where we're a student-centered approach. yes, we understand you're a Black founded charter school, right? We understand that you might be a BIPOC founded charter school. But what we're trying to do is say that we are student centered. We care a lot about student outcomes. We care also about the school to prison pipeline and things of that nature. And we're trying to find a way to bridge the gap between the district and how we're student centered and the charter schools, because in one way or another, the children are matriculate from the charter schools to the public schools and the public schools back to the charter schools. And these are also public dollars that we have to make sure are being spent accordingly. And again, that's the perspective. So it's unfortunate that that is what's been stated. And there's an ongoing, I wouldn't even call it an investigation. We hired a third party to come in to do, I guess, an independent investigation just to do a third party look at whether there is indeed disparate impact or disparate treatment between charters, dependent upon who runs them. But we're all about the children. And the last time I checked, there are many non-Black founded charter schools that are servicing the same Black children. And I think I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Now, how did you find yourself on the school board? Because I think that's an interesting story. How did you find yourself on the school board? And what have you learned about education from this experience that you didn't know before?
Okay. And actually, I wanted to add something to my last answer if I could.
Okay.
So, and I'll answer your question. We do, but I will say personally, I think that the charter school law itself is the problem here. It does not give us the freedom or the mechanisms necessary to think about equity, to move resources from maybe better supported charter schools because they may have access to outside dollars or what have you, to the charter schools who need help, right? So we're compelled by law to do certain things. And because we compelled to do law about certain things, it may have a disparate impact. Again, we still have to figure out whether that is us or the system, but I will argue that it is the law. But anyway, to get back, answer your question, I think, so the way that I got on the board was one of my close colleagues told me, hey, I think you should apply for the Board of Education. I also heard rumors that the mayor was really trying to find a Black man to be one of the people to be considered. And I said, first I thought about it, but then I thought to myself, when I became a lawyer, I said, I want to be able to do something that can impact our communities in the quickest and fastest way, in addition to being an attorney. So I've been on other boards, whether it's the Barristers Association of Philadelphia, the ACLU in Philadelphia, things like that. But I always felt that I wanted to have a more closer impact on our community. So I put my name in a hat, and then I had a conversation with the family, and everybody said it's a go, and I found myself on the board. I never would have thought growing up that I would be on the Board of Education of Philadelphia. So I feel completely blessed to be here.
Well, what have you learned about education from your service on the board that you didn't know before?
It's an onion. There's a lot of layers. And I think if we're not communicating in a way that is constructive about why we do things, it's easy for assumptions to be made. And I think it's easy for the public trust that I think we have to still earn to be given. Also, I would say, I think what I've been more surprised about is, and this is not to mention any names or any groups of individuals, but what it means to be student-centered, I think means different things to different people. Some might say, well, it's really those who are the custodians of the children, they should have, a bigger voice. Or some might say, we say it's the student and the parents, that piece, and just how poorly underfunded we are. I think when you have 60 cents on the dollar, what is necessary to educate children, you find yourself feeling like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And this isn't something that's a secret. It's something that we've known for 50, 40 years, and yet we're still fighting to have fully funded education.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us. And just, to kind of put a bow on my particular participation, I started out as an education reporter. And I started covering politics because I started noticing where those two intersect. And I found that teachers didn't know enough about politics to be useful, and politicians didn't know enough about education to be useful. So we thank you for coming on, because maybe we'll be able to get a little education to the people who are actually in charge of implementing policy. And again, we thank you. And I'll take you back to Larry McGlynn, who's our co-host, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you very much, Denise. President Schreier, I just have one last question for you. In the beginning of the interview, I asked you what the difference between, the school district was from your time as a student to now. What I'd like to ask you now is, what do you hope the difference will be between now and the time you come off the board?
Well, so there's right now, there was a conversation that began, and I think it's a form, it is a form of engagement where we set out and asked Philadelphia what superintendent did Philadelphia want. And it wasn't just a half, baked way of doing it. We did a lot of legwork as a board to really figure out what does Philadelphia want. That conversation is still continuing now.
All right. We'd like to thank School Board President Reginald Schreier for being with us. The rest of that interview will be on our website and in our newsletter. And now here is our interview with Councilmember Mike Driscoll. All right, Councilman Mike Driscoll, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So the first thing I'd like to ask you about, the last time we spoke, you had just been sworn in and taking your seat on council. What has this job been like for you since about 6 months ago, I guess?
So if you recall, it was sort of baptism by fire, because we got sworn in on June the 10th, and then the budget, we were right in the middle of the budget. We had 3 weeks to immerse ourselves to familiarize ourselves and immerse ourselves and advocate for the 6th Council-matic. And I thought given the circumstances, I thought we did a pretty good job of putting our imprint on the budget. But it was like 3 weeks of craziness, and then we adjourned, and then it was time for me to get my staff and my district office up and running and do some training and all the introductions. You can imagine, we met with every department head, all the legal counsel, the staffers, all summer long. We did the meetings, the meet and greets. And then since September, we've been back at it in person, as you know, on the council floor, tackling some of these really tough issues that the city's facing right now.
And
so people, Larry, people have been asking me, I don't know if this makes sense or not, but people ask me the difference of being a state rep and a city councilman. And I think I've narrowed it down to a military phrase, in that I went from the Air Force to the infantry, the Army infantry. It's sort of like hand-to-hand combat now. Whereas before, we were doing budgetary and legislative issues in Harrisburg. Here, we're jumping right into, like 3 hours into the new year, I got a phone call that there was an explosion in Port Richmond in our district, where these folks their homes were destroyed. Thank God, no loss of life. And if you'd seen the destruction on that site, it is hard to believe that nobody was killed. There's literally those 2 houses were leveled. So spending several days down at Port Richmond, trying to make sure that all the city resources were connected to those folks, answering as many questions as we could. We still don't know the cause of the explosion, and according to the gas department and the Office of Emergency Management, we may not know for quite some time of if we ever find out what the exact cause of the explosion was. And then 2 nights ago, in the northern part of my district, there was a triple shooting. I don't know if you saw that, right near Lincoln High School, unrelated to the school, but clearly a targeted attack on 4 individuals that for whatever reason were targeted, and 3 were killed, and 1 is in critical condition in a hospital. So yeah, so we're not just writing legislation; we're literally out on the streets trying to make sure we're connecting city agencies with the neighborhood, and certainly keeping a continued dialogue with all our captains in the district, so that we can share information with them that we learn, and they can sort of brief us on what they're doing, because public safety is a really, really big issue right now.
So coming into this spring, in addition to public safety, what are some of your top priorities legislatively?
So, I think we really want to start to attack the quality of life issues. And in order to do that, I think we're going to, well, one thing we just passed an ordinance on the, I don't know if you saw our ordinance on the truck parking. That's been a really big problem. So we're now going to be able to communicate more directly and get signage up more directly with the streets department on where you can actually park these larger vehicles and other vehicles, because that ultimately leads to quality of life issues in the neighborhood. I think we have a unique opportunity, Larry, here in that there's new leadership in the parking authority. And we've had some preliminary conversations with Rich Laser, who was in the Kenny administration. And he is sympathetic to our plight with these vehicles. And he's willing to assume more responsibility within his staffing to crack down on what we identify in the districts as problem parking and problem truck parking. So I feel pretty good about that we have the legislation passed and we have potential partners besides L&I and the streets department on enforcement. And I think we're going to continue to work with Mayor Kenny's administration, not just on a case-by-case basis, but on, like we did with the budget back in June, giving them the money to hire folks to do the enforcement. We also increased the money for 300 new officers in the police department. That's the good news. Bad news is we're having a tough time hiring. The first class we had back in August, 7 individuals showed up. So they had to cancel the training for the police, and a new round started in December. But we lost 4 months there that we could have had more trained officers on the street. So I think part of our job is to make sure we have the money to bolster public safety, to bolster license and inspection, and then which we did. But then getting people hired is our next challenge. So what we did back in November was we introduced legislation that is pending that relaxed the residency rules for hiring of city employees. We think that that's going to give us some more tools in the toolbox to hire some more people. My preference obviously would be to have Philadelphians hired, but we've been trying unsuccessfully. And so, I figured we got to do something. So we introduced that. And I think we're getting some momentum on that piece of legislation. And hopefully it'll be entertained sometime soon when we go back on January the 19th.
So how are you going to handle the budget process this spring? It's going to start probably in March, and you saw a little bit of it right after your sworn. What are you looking at? What are you keeping an eye on?
Let's say that again, Larry.
The budget process is going to start probably in about March, and the hearings will begin. What are you keeping an eye on, and what are some of your priorities for that process?
So we haven't. One thing is of particular interest to me is this: we have an all-inclusive playground that is being designed for Winchester Park area of my district, and it will really be one of the only of its kind, other than FDR Park down there, that will actually be able to handle some special needs children. And we think that is really important for us to send a message to the autism community and the special needs community that you're as important as any other child in this. So that's going to be a big push of ours. We're going to continue to push to fund L&I. I know we're going to get to that later in the interview, but there's going to be, and we'll send this to you within the next week. There's going to be an aggressive round of recruiting for L&I coming out of the L&I department, and we're going to need and want to get the word out that Philadelphia's open for business and is hiring. So I think navigating the process of putting more money into the agencies for enforcement, whether that be streets, whether that be L&I, whether that be public safety, you name the department. We just right now are shorthanded, and that I can't stress that one enough. I am going to introduce legislation to ban fuel sales for unlicensed vehicles. You know, I think that's going to be really important to us. These ATVs, while I get if they're in the right areas and they're not on public streets being a nuisance, they can be a very entertaining form of entertainment. But the reality is, we're seeing in our district is, you know, they're on the Roosevelt Boulevard, they're on Frankfurt Avenue, they're on Aramingo Avenue, and they're not just on those roads riding, they're actually violating speed limits and common courtesy on the roadways. So more is going to have to be fleshed out, I think, when we introduce this legislation. You know, we don't want unintended consequences, but at the same time, we want to highlight that we got a problem, and unlawful behavior is not going to be tolerated. Same thing with the district attorney's office. We've approached the attorney general about more enforcement in the city. If the district attorney's office isn't going to prosecute, somebody needs to. You saw the problem we had with the Wawa's closing in Center City, and part of it was, you know, retail theft was being unmet. You know, we weren't arresting people, and if we did arrest people and it was less than $500, they were getting thrown out. But what message is that sending to our folks, that you can come in and steal up to a certain amount and it's okay? It's not okay. So that'll be part of our 2023, and just general quality of life issues. I think we talked a little bit back in June. We were starting to get phone calls about boom parties. I don't know. Yeah. So I didn't know what a boom party was until this past year. But what they do is they have this network of either text chains or email chains that say, hey, we're going to meet at this certain location at 11 o'clock tonight. And then all these cars gather, and then they come out with all these big speakers, and they literally have a party, not worrying about how loud this music is. And we actually had phone conversations with the chief of police of Cinnaminson and Delran, New Jersey, that their folks were being woken up at night from the boom parties on our side of the river. And so you can imagine our neighborhoods like Tacony and Tarsdale and Bridesburg and Port Richmond, that these parties were assembling. That's a quality of life issue that we're going to concentrate on as well.
All right, we'd like to thank Councilmember Mike Driscoll for being with us on the program. We're going to put the rest of that interview in our newsletter and our website. Now, Denise, I feel like there's a lot going on all the time. So what are you keeping an eye on, and what are we going to see from you in our newsletter on Friday? And I think you're muted there.
Muted. Okay. Tomorrow, I'm going to a candidate forum on gun violence. Councilman Curtis Jones and Councilman Kenyatta Johnson are co-hosting this candidates forum on gun violence. and it's apparently all 10 of the Democratic candidates that have announced are going to be there. Now, what's going to be interesting is to see if this candidates forum turns out like the candidates forum a business group recently did with the Democratic mayoral candidates that featured Sherelle Parker kind of attacking Jeff Brown. Now, for those of you who don't know who Jeff Brown is, except for him running for mayor, he's a gentleman that owns a chain of ShopRites and fresh grocery stores, most of which are put or have been, put in what are known as food deserts, places like North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, places where grocery stores don't necessarily go because they don't think they'll make money and that people will shoplift and different things. Part of the reason why Brown is running for mayor is because he believes that he can build on the connections that he has made, particularly with the Black community in those areas, because of the grocery stores he has there. Now, the accusations that Sherelle Parker made against him in a clip that's kind of going around the internet right now, where she talks about how the wages that are paid to the workers in his grocery stores aren't necessarily living wages, and that the jobs are low wage jobs, and that they're not necessarily the best jobs you can get. I've heard them a few times from other sources of mine where people have said this. But my thing is, it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to that. But the reason why I bring that up is because as part of my column, I'm going to be talking about whether or not these forums are even useful. I mean, sure, it gives you a chance to get your name out there and get your points out there, even if in the case of Sherelle Parker, you're doing some yelling into a microphone. But what are we really learning from this? And is it worth the time to sit through presentations from 10 people, some of whom are not going to make it onto the ballot? And that's what I'm going to be talking about, because I'm going to sit through this forum, see what it's about, and see if it's worth the time that people are going to be expected to take on it. Because we're going to have a lot of these forums over the next few weeks. And what folks really need to pay attention to is what the topics are, who is there, who's answering the questions, and whether or not they're answering the questions that you want asked. Because while it's a good thing that the whole economic aspect of Jeff Brown's grocery stores came up, I don't know if it actually came up in a way that was beneficial and asked the main question that we're going to be asking throughout this election cycle, which is, what are you going to do about poverty?
Right. And Denise, I'm 100% with you. Debates in general, I don't think are as constructive as we make them out to be at the presidential level, congressional level, whatever, and particularly at this level, because typically, you're asked a question, you get like a minute, maybe 2 minutes to answer it, which is not enough time at all to get into any depth to really explain that answer. And you have 10 people and it's just kind of a rapid fire kind of thing. It's not really great. And I remember going back to when I first started in journalism was the district attorney's race when Larry McGlynn was elected the first time. So I went to multiple DA forums, sometimes 3 a week. And what you start to find is that they're kind of getting asked the same questions over and over again, giving the same answer. And almost everyone's kind of bored. There's nothing exciting or interesting really happening at these things. The format is not great.
And in this case, you have volume that's an issue here. You are going to be asking these questions of 10 people. How many questions are you really going to get to ask? Maybe 5 if you're lucky.
Maybe.
And
Yeah.
these 10 people are expected to answer these 5 questions, and they probably won't even be, in all cases, the most complete questions. And
Yeah.
the topic itself, gun violence, because I know for a fact, as I sit through this thing, that no one is going to talk about how to deal with the root causes of gun violence. I know that I have to do it, and I'm gonna sit through it, and I'm gonna pay attention and all of that, but I can already tell this is going to frustrate me. And how I know it's going to frustrate me is because it's not going to talk about the root causes. It's not going to address those. And because it's not going to address those, we're going to be right back where we started. And that's counterproductive.
Yeah.
And I really think, like I said, I understand that you have to do this. I get it. I have no problem with it. I truly get it. But the bottom line is, what do we gain from this? And that's kind of the question I'm going to be asking. You have like 10 candidates. There's going to be 11 billion forms. They're all very important. Everybody needs to ask their questions of the candidates. But I question the usefulness.
Well, and the truth of the matter, too, Denise, is when you have so many forums, the impact is diluted as well. You're not going to have the kind of interest that you would have under normal circumstances if we were just having one call it a debate. But it's not the kind of thing that everybody's watching, right? So some of these are available online, but for the most part, I don't think most people are going on a random Tuesday evening or whatever it may be to these different forums. And it just like you said, this is not conducive to choosing your candidate, in my opinion. It's
Right.
There's got to be a better way, right?
There's got to be a better way. And I would really like for
Good
folks to
news is we have ideas about that we're going to be working on.
Right. Right.
So no, I agree with you, and I think that's really important to talk about. And this forum tomorrow night's going to be interesting. And I agree with you that are we going to see some of the same dynamics develop that we've started to see in the previous forum? Because I when it comes to campaigns, I'm a big believer in momentum. And momentum can happen early and sometimes too early. And if you're strong early on, it makes you a target for the other candidates. And this is a big field.
Yeah, because we've already seen a little bit of that. We've seen Derek Green come after Helen Gim. We've now seen Sherelle Parker come after Jeff Brown. So you're right. It becomes problematic in that way because it becomes WrestleMania, and sure, WrestleMania works as a wrestling competition, but it doesn't necessarily work as a political thing.
Yeah, nobody's electing Hulk Hogan mayor.
No, and you
that's the only wrestler I know. So.
Right, and you shouldn't have like candidates coming off the top turnbuckle, like Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
I don't know who that is, but I'm sure it's a wrestler. But you're absolutely right, and the hope is that as we move on, we're going to be able to do some of that work here. So we want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Next week on the show, we'll have Councilmember Cindy Bass and Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson. So we'll be back next week here on Hall Monitor.